Hey, good afternoon and welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone had a wonderful week. Sorry, it's been about a week since I did a video. It's been really busy of late, just at work and just other things kind of going on in my personal life. But I do plan to do 2 videos this weekend. I'm going to be pulling out one of the other complete sets since we're at the start of a new month, and I'm going to have an opportunity to kind of show that one off. Haven't decided just what set yet, so it'll be a little bit of a surprise when I do it. But briefly, we are now a week away from the Chicago Marathon. And for those of you who have not run a marathon before or just kind of interested in it or don't know much about the Chicago or the Abbott World Majors, this is actually the medal they give you at the finish. When you complete the marathon, it changes from year to year. It's usually got some sort of Chicago landmarks. This one was the skyline from last year. I've completed it 5 times so far, and so I have 5 different ones, and you'll have another one when I finish next weekend. The race is on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to maybe putting a little video together, kind of just talking about the expo and my experience running the race. I don't know if I'll get that done after the race next Sunday, but that's kind of my goal, to maybe get it done that evening. But we'll see. This kind of marked the end of the last long run for everybody that's kind of preparing for the race this weekend. Would be their last run, and typically that kind of varies depending on what your abilities are and what your training plan is. For me, it was 10 miles today, but in years past, I've done as many as 14 in the last weekend. But I wanted to just kind of do a different topic today. Wanted to just talk about the joy of picking up ungraded cards. A lot of people call them raw cards. And again, I don't prefer that term because it just makes it feel like there's something about it that's kind of unfinished. When cards are produced, they're produced ungraded. So it just kind of makes it, when you say the term raw, well, I understand it, it just makes it feel like it's kind of talking less than the product. But ideally, before grading happened and having cards encapsulated, that's all you ever did. So I want to just kind of talk through that experience, but briefly just kind of have a couple pickups here. Wanted to explain a little bit of the background too I got going on here. So I got Eden Hazard over here. Doesn't play for Chelsea anymore, but it's been my favorite Chelsea player to date. In the background over there, because actually this is FIFA release weekend. So it's FIFA 23 is coming out. Actually have it downloading right now, and I'm looking forward to playing the game. It's really the only video game I play much at all, and I'm really looking forward to playing it this year. So that's kind of why I have Chelsea represented back here in the background. Unfortunately, they did win a game today. And White Sox won 2 in a row. Their season is well over, but obviously I'm still going to represent my team up here. 2 recent pickups for my 2001 Topps Gold project. I've expanded a bit to include a few more stars, but also the golden moment cards of guys that are like retired Hall of Famers. So I picked up the Jackie Robinson recently. These are usually pretty affordable, so I got it for like $1. They're all out of like 2001. So I try not to get them when I can find shipping pretty inexpensive, or the card is priced right with shipping, where it would kind of be about the right price if you didn't have, if you just bought the card alone. And I got Jake Peavy from the update, which was actually his rookie season. So his rookie card is actually in the base set. Don't have that one at this point. But anyway, like kind of getting back to the topic here is, when baseball cards first came, first getting into collecting, you only got ungraded things. Because it just didn't exist. Grading was something that was kind of subjective, and it didn't have like a third-party grader, such as like over here SGC being able to kind of determine, okay, this is going to be a 5, and this is what a 5 ideally should look like and be marketed as on the market when you resell it, right? So I think at this point in the last year or so, I was kind of starting like gravitating towards only like looking at graded cards, but I've kind of rediscovered the joys of like kind of getting stuff ungraded. There's just so much stuff you can get at like a good price when it's like kind of ungraded. Now, not in favor of guys, dealers selling cards that are ungraded at graded card prices. I'm not as big of a fan of those at that point, because it's just, the graded cards took the time to have it graded and it was verified at a certain price. So I feel like ungraded items should go for a little bit less than graded items. And that's not always the case that you see when you go to card shows and things like that. So that's kind of always been sort of become a pet peeve of mine, if you will. and I'm just wanted to see how other people kind of felt about that, just in general. Maybe I'm just kind of, it's just me, I'm having kind of that issue. I understand if you have a beautiful card, it's in great shape, you might pay the same prices for a graded item, but often that's not the case, like stuff you're kind of looking at least not for the low graded vintage I'm getting. So anyway, when I first started getting vintage cards, I'd get something like this, a 1940 play ball here, Lloyd Wayner, and I was like super excited to get, a Hall of Famer, for a set I never had as a kid, but like looks really, really cool. So, at that point, I think when I got this card, grading had just started. Got it in the early 2000s. But I had no reason to think it wasn't fake. No one's going to be faking probably a little Poison Wayner. It's in the condition where I would not fear that it's been drastically altered if it wasn't altered at all. So there's nothing wrong with this card, and I have no intentions of ever getting it graded to sell because it probably wouldn't grade out that high anyway, so it would actually not be much of a profit for me anyway, so I'm totally happy with it. So I pulled some cards out, just like kind of stuff from the 50s up to 1960, and then a group of rookies from the 60s that are just stuff I picked up that are ungraded. And at some point, maybe will be in sets that I might want to work on, including a series of like play ball cards from 1940, which I thought were really kind of cool when I picked these up in a lot, probably back again in the early 2000s. They're not perfect by any means. This one's got writing on the back, and there's bends on here, but just the authenticity of the cards are really kind of cool. Just kind of looking through these things and handling them, which you can't do with a graded card unless you crack it open. You can't really like put your hands on the card in a way, and sometimes you learn a lot about the cards by actually just putting your hands on them, smelling them, just kind of little things like that, looking at them different angles under the lights. You can kind of begin to start understanding like how it was made, what's real, what's not, and then I just love kind of looking up the histories of some of these guys that played in an era that I never saw. My father probably never saw these guys play because he grew up, he was born later on in the 40s. So it's just kind of cool. Eldon Walker, I read a book that he wrote when I was probably in the early 2000s, and he was talking about his experiences with like Charlie Gehringer and Hank Greenberg and those Tiger teams from the 30s and 40s, shortly before he died. So it was kind of cool reading about that. That's how I learned a lot about those guys. Until like 1952 tops, like I think I got both these cards, I think, before there was graded options of buying these cards. And they're low grade, and it would not be something that would grade out all that high if I did it. This one's got like a crease in it, but it's so cool to like, this is what you could afford. Sometimes when I was a kid or a young adult, I couldn't afford like going out and getting like some of the Hall of Famers for these sets. So this is how I was able to get a hold of some of these sets, and I got a black back and a red back on here, so I get a chance to kind of see some of the differences in how the cards were made and designed. So got Connie Ryan from the Fighting Phils at that point, from the Whiz, I think it was the Whiz Kids in the 1950s. And some of these are ones I like picked up recently, but this was also an opportunity for me to get like, some Hall of Famers I wouldn't be able to get otherwise. Like, a graded copy of a Hal Newshauser from 1953 would have cost me a lot. This one didn't cost me much at all when I purchased it, actually. And it's not in the best shape, and that's okay. Like, it's not a card that's going to leave my collection. It's not one I'm trying to move on. My first Ralph Kiner from 54 Bowman was a card I bought ungraded. So I had a chance to get a Ralph Kiner in my collection, which is really cool. And these are things I all picked up in like the late 90s and early 2000s, by and large, unless I said otherwise. Phil Rizzuto. I think it was one of the first Phil Rizzutos I ever owned from 54 tops. I don't think I have any graded 54 tops right now. This one I got in the late 90s, and it actually looks in pretty good condition until you see that obviously somebody wrote center field right above his baseball cap there, and then tried to erase it. I got indicating what position he played. So that is my Duke Schneider that I have, although I have one from the 57 top set that I completed. Phil Rizzuto, another Phil Rizzuto from 55 Bowman. And you can get these just sometimes for like half the price or less of like a graded option of that card. And I don't have, again, I don't have worries about it being like altered and things like that, because it's not high grade anyway. This Minoso was like one I got for like 99 cents. And that was a kind of a fairly recent pickup. And I think that was in a lot, actually. So I think it was one of like a few cards. And it's when I picked up over the summer when I was up in Green Bay. Got a Bob Feller card. in there, so that's pretty cool. And it's just something fun kind of being able to do this in person too, where you look at the card and you kind of see the corners, and you know, some of those things you can do at shows where it's kind of fun to pick them up. Another Ralph Kiner, so I got as a recent pickup. In there for another 55 Bowman. George Kell. I actually have this one graded too, and I think this one came in a lot. Oddly enough, about the same condition. I think it's probably a 2 at best. So, and then, you know, on to like 56 tops over here. Hal Newhouser again, his final card. Nothing really too wrong with this card. I mean, it's got some problems on the edges, and that's okay by me. Other than that, it's in pretty good shape. Walt Alston, his very first card as manager of the Dodgers. I picked this up a long time ago for like nothing. And like I said, this was a chance for me to pick up like, you know, fairly inexpensive Hall of Famers back in the day. This one I got at some point like in the mid-90s when I was collecting, probably right before I stopped for a period of time collecting. And I got Eddie Matthews, one of my first ones in there. And that card really wouldn't be worth like paying to get graded. Yeah, it probably would if I ever sold it, because of some of the imperfections in the card, it wouldn't be getting a high enough grade to really make up for it. Red Shandies, I got picked up at a recent show. So another George Kell, I got in a lot. I think that's actually his last card in 58. 57s I all got in my binder for my set. And that's kind of also cool where you get ungraded stuff, is you can have it all in the same binder. Now granted, I got some graded cards for my 67 set. There's a part of me who would have loved to maybe add them ungraded, but I think given the price I had to pay for some of those cards, I think I felt a little more comfortable getting a graded just to make sure it was real and it hadn't been altered. Early win, and also the popularity of the ones that I picked up too had a lot to do with it. Jim Bunning's second year. Here's one that's been really rough handled, is Richie Ashburn. A lot of snowing there. There's 58. Pee Wee Reese. It was the first Pee Wee Reese I got. It was part of a lot I got some time in the early 2000s. It's not in the greatest condition, but it's fun, nevertheless. Kurt Flood. I think I've shown that one before on the show at some point. Nellie Fox. And these things are just really fun, kind of looking at them. Here's one of my bigger pickups of the year at a show. Is a Ted Williams All-Star card from 58. Just beautiful. And for me, there's nothing wrong with it. At some point, it would be cool and it being graded. And don't get me wrong, I do like graded cards. I think they look awesome. But I'm just not always going to be tied to them. Warren Spahn, another 58 All-Star there. And get into the 59s and 60s here. We got Nellie Fox, I picked up last weekend. Early win in there. Had that one for a long time. Bill Maseracio, I think this is the very first 59 Topps card I got, and it's been well loved. I think I got it for like a quarter back in the day. Probably still maybe only worth a quarter now in its condition. Whitey Ford, got it out of a discount box at the National a few years ago because it's so miscut, but I still love it, right? It's Whitey Ford. Usual, got there. His Baseball Thrills card. I think I've shown that one before. And then I got some cards from the 60s, some of which I've shown recently, like the Early Win. It's fun looking. Nellie Fox. 1960 Topps is definitely on my list of sets I would love to be able to complete. Probably after this project I'm working on with the other 3 vintage sets. That might be the next one. Jim Cott, Rookie All-Star. Great card. Another Walt Alston. Picked that up at some point for like, 99 cents and a lot. Mountain Magicians, got Warren Spahn on there. Luis Aparicio, showed that off a few weeks ago when I picked that one up. Robin Roberts, it was the first Robin Roberts guy, was from 1960. And then obviously Minnie Minoso, which I've shown before. And then I mentioned I had a few ungraded cards from the early parts of the 1960s for sets that I'm not currently working on or have completed. It's going to be a Chicago feel for all of these items, I think, except for one. Even though it's not the team I root for, but, I got Ron Santo, All-Star rookie. back in the day. I think I got these like in, again, late 90s, early 2000s. Didn't get that for much. Like I said, grading was just coming around, so you know, I didn't really have like an option of buying a lot of graded cards because there wasn't a lot on the market at that point for these things. Billy Williams. I think for a little time I thought it was kind of a little silly at that point, at least in my life. My opinion has since changed on grading. I just don't like the price of grading right now. That's more of the issue. Lou Brock rookie. Granted, he's in a Cubs uniform, but you know, he's a Cardinal Hall of Famer, right? Fergie Jenkins, his rookie, Cub Hall of Famer, Philadelphia Philly there. And the final one I wanted to show you is just the same from the same set. Got Don Sutton down there. So again, vintage is fun. I really enjoy picking up all these raw cards from time to time. And you just get great deals on them, and just have a lot of fun kind of going through the cards and touching them, smelling them, and things like that. Things that kind of just takes me back to like collecting. You know, I didn't buy cards graded as a kid, so like the nostalgia just sometimes doesn't hit me in the same way that an ungraded card does. All right, guys, I hope you had a good time watching it. I'm sure it was sorry for the length of the video, but I hope you had enjoyed it. And again, tomorrow, likely going to be posting another video. It's going to be one of the complete sets. Hope you enjoy that as well. And have a wonderful week. And enjoy football tomorrow and the end of the baseball season. By the time I talk to you, probably next week, I will obviously either be preparing for or have already completed the marathon, depending on what day I do it. And we'll also be talking about the Major League Baseball playoffs. All right, so have a great afternoon and weekend.